The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
To give you guys an idea of where we are now, DIS1 has tried to give you an insight into three parts. The cognition part, sort of performance of people, models of interaction with affordances, mappings, constraints, various types of knowledge in the world, in the head, and errors, mistakes, and slips, and so on. And we've derived some first design principles from those. This was the human, essentially. Then we looked at technology and systems, computing, and took a look back at the history of HCI and saw different technological and also interaction revolutions taking place. And then finally, in the third part of this class, we've looked at the design process itself. So we've gone over, now that you understand the nature of humans interacting with technology and how technological opportunities have been evolving, how do you actually build a good system? These two things together here can probably give you 30% of the right answers in a concrete design process for an interface. But 70% of it you will have to find out by going through the iterations, right? And this is something HCI has been preaching for 30 years. Fortunately now in the last 10 years, we've also seen it being picked up by the software development community through things like agile design. For the last 5 years maybe we've seen it floating around as under the term design thinking. But essentially what we've done in this class here, and what I've been teaching since '98 or something, is exactly this design thinking process, right? So the idea of emphasizing with the user, getting into prototyping and design early, testing with them, and evolving at an iterative, fast pace. So all these techniques for user observation, ideation, prototyping, studies, evaluation, and notations for interaction design are part of this third last block. So you may be wondering, what's next? Of course, one of the things you can do is just come back and see us again next semester. Designing Interactive Systems 2, which is an incredibly inventive name for the next class, is going to be more related to the technology of interfaces. So all of you who were starting to feel uncomfortable because we're talking about people and humans and all that squishy stuff, you're going to feel right at home in DIS2 because it's going to become much more technical. We're going to talk about what makes a user interface tick. So how do you actually build a system that can display stacks of overlapping windows on the desktop, or a fast-moving mouse pointer, or a multi-touch interface, or a mobile client that reacts onto sensors, etc. So we're going to look into how do those APIs that you so far have probably only explored as a user, so to say, as an application developer, how do you build these? When you look at I don't know if you've written a Mac or an iOS app or under Windows or Linux, whatever, Java, you've used these APIs for making windows appear and making buttons appear, and somebody wrote those. And we're going to look at how do you do that? Because this is a challenge that is coming up again and again every time a new technology rolls around, whether it's smartphones with touch screens or wearable devices or whatnot. The challenge of designing the right operating system level support for these kinds of things, designing the right toolkits, software toolkits, libraries, frameworks, design patterns in software, that's going to come back again and again. And I hope that some of you guys will be involved in shaping that next generation of user interface toolkits and not just using them as application developers. So it's going to be about the technical concepts, software paradigms, and technologies behind HCI and interface development. It's a fairly technical class, and we will move through a lot of existing toolkits at a fast pace. So be ready to pretty much write a Hello World-like program every week or so in a completely different toolkit. But it's fun, and it's a lot of stuff that you learn that you will actually be building your own little mini Windows system in there in the first couple of weeks, which we've heard from students was one of the most sort of satisfying things to do because you'll learn a lot about how these things actually work. But we also move beyond Windows systems, clearly. So we'll be moving into questions of multimodality, audio in the interface, haptics, those kinds of stuff. So much more technical. It's also 6 ECTS credit class. And you can find out about it at /DIS2 on our homepage. This works for anything you're looking for in our group, whether it's a project name or a person's last name or a class. We always have these simple links. OK, then there's current topics. Current topics in HCI is a class where I would say this one, DIS1, was great for everybody to get a sense for usability. Once you've taken this class here, if you now go out into industry, I trust that you're not going to create major mess-ups in terms of usability in products ever in your life, right? If you are especially interested in continuing in HCI, maybe doing your thesis in this area with us, or just want to understand how do people do the research that leads to then 10, 20, 30 years later to products, or maybe sometimes 1 or 2 years, depending on the project. How do people do that? Then current topics is interesting. It's going to be giving you two things. You're going to understand the current sort of practice of how research in HCI is conducted. So we're going to talk about that much more. How do people come to new conclusions? How do they learn new stuff about how people interact with technology? We built a curved display a couple years ago that was not planar because we thought this is an interesting new space to explore. And then we found that people make all sorts of weird mistakes when they interact with it, that they weren't making on a planar, flat table. And so by doing that and modeling and understanding what was going on there, we were actually able to derive a sort of an error model of people interacting with non-planar surfaces and curved touch surfaces. And that's something that nobody in the world knew about before. So we've added sort of to the body of knowledge in the world about human-computer interaction. And those are very satisfying, to me, very satisfying results. Because that result will not get old in a year or two when the next kind of touch technology comes around. It's basically always true. Right? It's a research finding that will sort of stay around for a while. So that's the kind of stuff we do in HCI research. And you can learn about how to do that in this class. But you can also learn about the current things going on. And as a secret, this is also a wonderful class to come to if you're interested in doing a HEVI job or a thesis job at our chair, because most of our PhD students, if not all of them, will take over one of these classes and give you an overview of a particular area of HCI research that's currently hot that is also their own area of interest. So you basically get a free expose, and they're all going to do their sing and dance in front of you here and secretly trying to convince you to do your master's thesis with them, rather than the other guy. So it's a wonderful way to get an overview of current research happening and also understand what we are doing here at the lab in particular and find out whether you find one or the other topic particularly exciting. And even if you don't, I think the techniques we teach you there in terms of conducting proper research that is validated, that is externally verified, and that actually adds to the understanding in academia is a great thing, I think, to have. So this will be fed from recent journal articles. We're going over journal and conference articles. We'll be talking about the great Kite papers that we just saw the last 1 or 2 years. Those kinds of things are going to be part of that.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.